Okay, so listen to this. You have Kurt Gödel, right? The logician.
Yeah.
This guy reshaped how we think about logic, like completely revolutionized it.
Mm-hmm.
But get this. At the same time, he was like meticulously writing down lists and lists of slang.
Really?
From the New York Times.
Wow.
Yeah, jaywalker, humdinger, kangaroo court, all carefully noted down, like alongside his like complex theorems.
That's so interesting. It's like these little details, they give you a glimpse into like the mind of a genius.
Totally.
Yeah.
And welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis, where we dig into this age-old question: is there a link between like incredible creativity and mental illness?
Yeah.
Today we're looking at Kurt Gödel, his life,
Okay.
as detailed in the biography Journey to the Edge of Reason, to see if his story, sheds some light on this whole connection.
So Gödel's story is really fascinating because it kind of unfolds against this backdrop of like massive societal change and upheaval. Like he was born right in the middle of what historians call the golden age of security, the Austro-Hungarian Empire in its prime.
So think like opulent architecture and like lively intellectual salons, this thriving Jewish community that really shaped Viennese culture.
Yeah, it was a really unique mix.
It sounds almost idyllic,
Yeah.
a world of stability and intellectual excitement. Hard to imagine that such a seemingly like secure world would produce a mind that would later reveal the like inherent uncertainties within logic itself.
Yeah, and yet even golden ages have their shadows. Beneath the surface, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was this mix of nationalities and languages, simmering political tensions and growing economic disparities. This underlying instability, might have played a role in shaping Gödel's worldview.
That's a really interesting point. It makes you wonder if the cracks in the foundation of his society somehow mirrored the cracks he'd later discover in the seemingly like perfect world of logic.
Exactly. In a world teetering on the edge of chaos, the realm of mathematics and logic must have seemed like a refuge for Gödel, a place of absolute truth and unwavering certainty. But as we'll see, even this refuge would eventually reveal its own limitations.
So let's talk about Gödel's early life. What was it about mathematics and specifically logic that drew him in?
Well, from a young age, Gödel showed this remarkable capacity for focus and an almost obsessive attention to detail traits that would later become like hallmarks of his work. He was also really drawn to philosophy, exploring questions that went beyond the realm of just like empirical observation.
And it's here that we start to see hints of his unconventional thinking, right? This wasn't just a mathematician, crunching numbers. This was a mind wrestling with big existential questions.
Absolutely. Even in his youth, Gödel exhibited a certain distrust of what he called common sense, preferring the rigor and certainty of formal systems. This led him to the study of logic, where he sought to establish like unshakable foundations for knowledge.
It's ironic, isn't it? He sought refuge in the seemingly perfect world of logic, only to discover that even it has inherent limitations. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about the Vienna Circle and how Gödel's ideas both aligned with and challenged their way of thinking.
Okay, so the Vienna Circle was this group of philosophers and scientists, and they were committed to building a purely empirical view of the world.
Right.
They believed that knowledge should be based on observation and logical analysis, rejecting anything that couldn't be empirically verified.
You'd think Gödel, with his emphasis on logic, would have fit right in.
Yeah.
But it seems it wasn't that simple.
Yeah, while Gödel was drawn to their intellectual rigor, he fundamentally disagreed with their core tenets. He believed in a realm of absolute eternal truths that existed independently of our ability to prove them empirically. It was a kind of mathematical Platonism, a belief in a world of perfect forms accessible through reason.
So he agreed with their methods, but not their ultimate goals. He saw logic as a tool for uncovering deeper truths, not just for verifying what we could observe.
Exactly. And this difference in perspective led to some pretty fascinating clashes, particularly with Ludwig Wittgenstein, the philosophical idol of the Vienna Circle. Wittgenstein believed that the limits of language define the limits of our world, while Gödel saw language as merely a tool, albeit a flawed one, for accessing a realm of truths that existed beyond our immediate perception.
It's a debate that gets to the heart of what we can truly know and how we know it. And it seems this clash of ideas took place against the backdrop of Gödel's first major mental breakdown.
Yeah, and this breakdown happened right as he was working on his most famous theorem, the incompleteness theorem, which would shake the very foundations of mathematics. Now, whether there's a direct causal link between his work and his mental health is debatable, but it's a question that has intrigued scholars for decades.
It does make you wonder, though, was his mind, in a sense, mirroring the very uncertainties he was uncovering in the realm of logic.
It's a compelling thought, isn't it? And it speaks to the complex interplay between our inner world and the intellectual landscapes we inhabit. But even as Gödel was grappling with these internal struggles, the world outside was descending into its own form of chaos. The rise of Nazism was casting a dark shadow over Europe, and it would soon have a profound impact on Gödel's life, as it did for so many intellectuals, particularly those of Jewish descent.
And this is what we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore how the political turmoil of the time, combined with Gödel's own internal struggles, shaped his journey and ultimately led him to seek refuge in a new world, the quiet academic haven of Princeton, New Jersey. But that's a story for next time.
So as we were saying, Gödel's life, took this dramatic turn as the world around him kind of descended into this chaos. Imagine Vienna, right? This hub of, intellectual and cultural exchange becoming increasingly hostile, all the freedoms that he, cherished slowly eroding. It was a really terrifying time for intellectuals,
Wow.
especially those of Jewish descent as the Nazi regime, tightened its grip on Austria.
Yeah, and in the middle of all this turmoil, there's a love story.
Oh.
Gödel meets Adele. She's a dancer, 6 years older than him, and they meet in a Viennese nightclub. Not exactly the setting you'd expect for, a world-renowned logician to find love right.
Their relationship definitely raised eyebrows. Among Gödel's circles, his friends and colleagues, they worried about him.
Yeah.
They saw Adele as an unsuitable match for, this brilliant but increasingly fragile logician.
But love is love, right?
Yeah.
And in Adele, Gödel found this fiercely loyal partner who would stand by him through thick and thin. She became his protector. She even defied the Nazis to get him out of Austria.
Adele's strength and unwavering devotion were so crucial for Gödel's well-being, especially as his anxieties and paranoia, intensified. There's this amazing story about Adele confronting a group of Nazi thugs who were harassing Gödel in Vienna, like literally standing up to them to protect him.
Wow, she sounds like a force to be reckoned with. It's clear she played such a vital role in his life, both practically and emotionally.
Absolutely. She was instrumental in his escape, this perilous journey that took them across Russia and the Pacific before they finally landed in Princeton, New Jersey. Such a drastic change of scenery from the, bustling intellectual heart of Vienna to the quiet, almost idyllic town of Princeton.
Princeton, with its leafy streets, colonial-era architecture, and slower pace of life, must have seemed like a world away from the turmoil of Europe.
And the Institute for Advanced Study, where Gödel got a position alongside Albert Einstein, offered a haven for intellectual pursuits.
It's amazing to imagine those two minds, Einstein and Gödel, walking and talking together on the grounds of the Institute. Einstein, the gregarious, playful genius who reshaped our understanding of the cosmos.
Yeah.
And Gödel, the intensely serious logician who exposed the inherent limits of our reasoning. I wonder what their conversations were like. That sparks the imagination, doesn't it? Accounts say that despite their very different personalities, they developed a deep and genuine friendship. They were united by a shared passion for profound questions, a willingness to challenge, conventional wisdom, and a deep appreciation for the beauty and mystery of the universe.
Their walks together became legendary in Princeton.
I bet.
People would spot them strolling through the woods, completely engrossed in conversation, their minds exploring the frontiers of physics, philosophy, and the nature of reality itself. It's a testament to the power of intellectual connection, how it can transcend differences in personality and background.
But even in this seemingly tranquil environment, Gödel's anxieties, they persisted. He worried about his job security, about being poisoned, even about the appliances in his home.
His fears, while often irrational, were very real to him.
He famously purchased multiple refrigerators out of fear that one of them might emit toxic gas.
It's a reminder that genius offers no escape from the human condition, from the anxieties and fears that can haunt even the most brilliant minds.
Yeah, makes you wonder, did his ability to perceive the world in such a profound and unconventional way, to see the hidden complexities and uncertainties that most of us can, blissfully ignore, somehow contribute to his anxieties?
It's certainly a possibility. Perhaps the same qualities that allowed him to make groundbreaking discoveries in logic also made him acutely aware of the, fragility and inherent unpredictability of the world around him.
So while he was achieving worldwide recognition for his work, receiving awards, honorary degrees, being hailed as one of the greatest logicians of all time, he was also retreating further into himself, struggling with these persistent inner demons.
His life became a study in contrasts, outward success and acclaim, but also a deepening inner turmoil. He was sought after by the world's leading thinkers, yet he preferred the company of his wife and a few close friends. He could command audiences with his brilliance, yet he feared the most mundane aspects of everyday life.
And this tension never really resolved itself. Makes you wonder if for Gödel there's a price to pay for his genius, for his ability to see the world in a way that few others could.
It's a question that goes to the heart of our, exploration today, the potential link between creativity and mental illness. Was Gödel's brilliance somehow intertwined with his struggles, or were they two separate aspects of his being that coexisted, sometimes harmoniously, sometimes in painful conflict?
And to further explore this question, we need to delve into Gödel's work at the Institute, particularly his fascination with one of mathematics' most enduring mysteries, the continuum hypothesis.
Ah, yes, the continuum hypothesis. It's a question that has captivated mathematicians for generations, a problem that probes the very nature of infinity and the limits of our ability to comprehend it. And it's a problem that in many ways reflects the core tensions in Gödel's own life and thought.
So before we dive into Gödel's specific contributions, can you give us a crash course on what the continuum hypothesis actually is? I'll admit the idea of different sizes of infinity makes my head spin a little.
It is a mind-bending concept, isn't it? The continuum hypothesis basically asks if there are other levels of infinity between the infinity of counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, and so on, and the infinity of all real numbers, which includes decimals and fractions. It's a question that, delves into the heart of set theory and explores the boundaries of what we can prove about the infinite.
Okay, so we're dealing with some pretty high-level math here. But how did Gödel, with his background in logic, approach this problem?
Well, he couldn't ultimately prove or disprove the continuum hypothesis, which is, in a way, consistent with his incompleteness theorem, which shows that there will always be true statements within a formal system that can't be proven within that system. But his work on the problem was revolutionary. He demonstrated that the hypothesis could be consistently added to the existing axioms of set theory without creating contradictions.
So he didn't solve the problem definitively, but he showed that it was at least possible, that it fit within the logical framework of mathematics.
Exactly. And his work on the continuum hypothesis, like his earlier work on incompleteness, was really intertwined with his philosophical views. Remember, he was a staunch Platonist, believing in a realm of absolute eternal truths accessible through reason. This belief put him at odds with much of the modern scientific worldview, which leans towards empiricism and observation as the primary sources of knowledge.
It's fascinating how his mathematical work and his philosophical beliefs seem to constantly inform and reflect each other. It's almost as if he saw mathematics not just as a set of tools, but as a way of peering into the very nature of reality.
That's a great way to put it. For Gödel, mathematics wasn't just about numbers and equations. It was a window into a deeper, more profound realm of truth. And this perspective, this unwavering belief in a world of absolute truths alongside his discoveries about the limitations of logic, created a fascinating and perhaps unresolvable tension in his thinking.
It's this tension, this interplay between brilliance and struggle, certainty and doubt, that makes Gödel's story so compelling and so relevant to our exploration of the Mad Genius Thesis. And as we move into the final part of our deep dive, we'll examine how this tension played out in his later years as his anxieties intensified and his health deteriorated. So we were talking about Gödel's work on the continuum hypothesis and how his philosophical views kind of intersected with his mathematical pursuits. But it seems like even while, he was achieving all this recognition in his field, his anxieties kept getting worse.
Yeah, that's true. And in his later years, these anxieties took a darker turn.
Oh.
His paranoia grew more intense, particularly his fear of being poisoned.
Wow.
He became increasingly reclusive, limiting his interactions, to just a few people. Adele, his wife, continued to be his steadfast companion, shielding him from the outside world, which he found just totally overwhelming.
It's so sad to picture, this brilliant mind able to grasp concepts that are just beyond most of us, trapped in a prison of his own fears.
It really highlights that genius doesn't make you immune to the struggles of being human.
Yeah.
Some might argue that Gödel's ability to see the world in such a profound way, to see the hidden complexities and uncertainties that, most people just ignore, that might have made him more vulnerable.
So you're saying that the same qualities that allowed him to make these groundbreaking discoveries in logic could have also made him super sensitive to the fragility and the unpredictability of life.
Exactly. It's like his mind was so good at uncovering hidden structures and patterns, it couldn't help but apply that same analytical lens to the world around him, a world that, can be pretty unsettling when you look too closely.
So even as he was receiving all this global acclaim for his work-winning awards, being honored by universities, being called one of the greatest logicians of the 20th century, He was retreating further into himself, his inner world becoming more and more dominated by these anxieties and fears.
Yeah, his life became this paradox, outward success, but also a deepening inner turmoil. He was sought after by all these leading thinkers, but preferred the company of his wife and just a handful of friends. He could captivate audiences with his brilliance, but dreaded the most basic parts of everyday life.
And this tension, this contradiction between his intellectual achievements and his personal struggles just kept escalating as his health got worse.
Tragically, Gödel's paranoia really took over in the end.
Oh.
He became convinced that his food was poison, and he refused to eat, wasting away to just a shadow of his former self. Adele, bless her heart, stayed by his side, but even her devotion couldn't break through the fear that had consumed him.
What a sad end to such an amazing life. It really makes you think about this mad genius idea we've been exploring, this possible link between exceptional creativity and mental illness.
Gödel's story definitely adds another dimension to this whole discussion. It forces us to really think about the nature of genius, the limits of reason, and, the potential cost of pushing the boundaries of knowledge.
So do you think his story supports this idea that there's a connection between creativity and mental illness?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I don't think there's a simple answer. Gödel's life, much like the logical systems he studied, was full of beauty and contradictions. He was a genius who helped us understand logic better, but at the same time revealed its limits. He was a rationalist who believed in absolute truths, but was tormented by irrational fears.
He was a man of incredible intellect who wanted a world of certainty and order, yet found himself living in a world of chaos and uncertainty, both in his own mind and in the world around him.
Exactly. Maybe it's in those contradictions, in the tension between brilliance and fragility, between reason and unreason, that we really find what makes him human.
That's a really thought-provoking point. Gödel's story is inspiring and tragic. It shows the power of the human mind, but also reminds us how vulnerable it can be. And for our listeners who want to learn more about this fascinating life, I highly recommend Journey to the Edge of Reason. You might find that in Gödel's struggles, there are insights into what it means to be human.
I agree. It's a story that stays with you, a story that challenges how we think about genius and sanity and the nature of truth itself.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Mad Genius Thesis. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep looking for those hidden connections that make life so interesting.